Hey there, everybody, and welcome to a brand new Firebase semi-live series. Are you excited? I'm excited. So I'm doing this series because in my previous Firebase conference video where I talked about how to turn on billing and still sleep at night, I ran you through a series of things you can do to get more information about your project's overall billing usage and, database usage and that sort of thing. One of the things I did was I turned on a billing PubSub that in turn kicked off a cloud function, which went ahead and analyzed my overall billing usage and sent me generally sort of smarter alerts, in that case through a Slack channel, if it turned out that my billing seemed to be higher than expected, or just, to send somewhat regular updates. I did all that very quickly and said, you know what, if you want to see the code, I'll show you in a later video. Some people did say, hey, I want to see that code a little better. And so this is that video. I'm going to basically show you how to set up a billing PubSub, and then use that to activate a cloud function, which then in turn can analyze your usage and hopefully, send you some more intelligent alerts depending on, what you are interested in, what's happening within your project. A number of people also asked, well, can you show me how to automatically disable my project, if my billing usage gets too high? And while I am still not a fan of that idea for a number of reasons that I'll get into when we get into that section, if I can figure it out, and hopefully we can because there is documentation, let's try and get that working too. So maybe we'll kind of, at the end of this, set up a little kill switch so that our project really kind of breaks if our billing usage gets too high. Like I said, not a huge fan of that solution for a number of reasons, but there are cases where I could see that being useful. So we'll talk about that a little later. As usual, I'll start with my typical caveats, which is like, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff in TypeScript. And I am not a TypeScript and or JavaScript expert. So if you see me doing, dumb things or silly things and you're like, is he doing that because he works at Google or Firebase and knows something more than I do? The answer is no. I'm kind of figuring this out as I go as well. So if you notice that I'm doing something and could be doing it in a slightly smarter way, go ahead and ping me nicely in the comments, and I'll make those adjustments for future videos. So with that, let's get started. All right, so here we are inside my project here. It's called Semi-Live Money Spender. Basically what this is a series of cloud functions that go ahead and read in a bunch of documents and write a bunch of documents on a somewhat regular basis so that over the course of a day, I end up spending like 3 or 4 cents. It's just enough for me to kind of have a somewhat accurate sense of my billing, and it makes these sample functions a little more useful. I'm not going to show you how to set up this project itself. I would say go ahead and use any project where you have billing set up. Or if you don't have any, go ahead and just turn on billing on your favorite project. Ideally, if you have a project where you actually are spending money, that's probably a little better because then you'll get more interesting results. But I am pretty sure most of this stuff could still work, even if you are in a project that is getting charged $0. It would just be a whole lot less interesting. So yeah, here we can see, I'm just looking at my usage here. Looks like I'm just enough to get over the free tier at around 12 o'clock every day. And I will probably get charged, 4 or 5 cents at the end of the day. So that's nice. So within my project, like I said, there's really not much going on beyond, the fact that I have a few functions in here, and this is kind of hidden away because honestly, you don't need to see this. It's kind of junky stuff that is, functions that are being called via a cron job that are, like I said, reading in or writing a few thousand documents every time they're being called. But I think the main point here is that I do have cloud functions set up and working inside my project as TypeScript. I'm using the TypeScript version of Cloud Functions, which in general we recommend because type safety always makes things easier to work with. Hopefully you have a project where you have this set up as well. If not, I believe what you can do is sort of go into your Firebase project and type Firebase init functions, and it will go ahead and ask you basically sort of what you want to get set up. Pick TypeScript, hopefully is your language. And I would say, yes, I want to use ESLint. In my case, I'm going to Control-C out of it just in case I don't think it's going to overwrite anything. It's usually pretty smart about that. But just in case, I'm going to Control-C out because I already have everything set up appropriately. Now, one thing I do want to note is we did recently switch from using TSLint to ESLint for our TypeScript functions. And at least with the default configuration that I had set up, I ran into a few areas where basically I was getting sort of some of these some of these errors, reported to me within VS Code or, by the linter. Perhaps these are issues that have been smoothed out by the time, you are using this. Like I said, I think I started using functions just as they switched linters from TSLint to ESLint, or maybe these are things where you're like, yeah, obviously, Todd, any TS developer would know this stuff. But, like I said, kind of new at this. But let me show you, in case you run into errors like this, where it's like, we're sort of running into parsing errors. There's a few things that I had to go in and fix. The first thing is I had to go and add, under my import resolver, this section here where we go ahead and, add TS among all these others. That fixed a few errors once I added that in. And while this fixed a few errors, this did lead to a couple other strange errors where, I'm getting like cannot read file, blah, 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 tsconfig.json. Now I was able to fix that by going into my ESLint RC file and adding this back in where I said, okay, well, let's set, our root directory to our directory name. I think that sort of helped our linter find where these files actually existed. That helped quite a bit. Although I also, and I think you might notice this if you restart, I had to include ESLint rc.js under my include list in my tsconfig.json file. So those were 3 changes I had to make in order to get the new ESLinter working for my functions. And like I said, I don't know how much this falls into like obvious to anybody that does any amount of tinkering with TypeScript developers, or if this was sort of new stuff, or if you don't even run into these errors. But just so you know, these were a few things I had to do. But where I'm at right now is I now have some cloud functions that I can go ahead and call. And so actually, you know what? This really probably isn't necessary, but let's do a little Firebase deploy only functions. Just so we can kind of deploy this, and we'll call this hello world function. So we'll wait a couple minutes. And that's funny. Used to be it would tell me where the HTTP call was, for instance, hello world. Looks like it's no longer doing that. That's weird. I wonder if there's a reason for that or just a little blip. But you know what? I'm pretty sure I can do that by going into my functions control panel here. And here we go. Here's the request that I'm going to make. I'll just copy, paste this into here, and I get hello from Firebase. All right, yay, things are working. So at this point, we've basically done nothing beyond sort of get our initial project set up and, made one call to a cloud function. This should be a good starting point for all of us. All right, so let's go ahead and actually start by activating our billing PubSub. Now PubSubs, and I explained this probably a little more eloquently in the other video, but PubSub is basically a sort of somewhat generic message passing service. It allows you to pass messages, generally defined as JSON objects, through various PubSub channels, and any service that is authorized to listen to that channel can go ahead and sort of receive those JSON messages as they're being sent. The nice thing about PubSub is like it's really kind of good at handling bursty bits of traffic. If all of a sudden you have a bunch of messages being sent at once, it can sort of handle those and keep them in like a little queue as you process them. And it's sort of, generally speaking, a nice kind of platform independent way of sending messages from one service to another. At least that is my overly simplified explanation. I'm sure the Google Cloud folks have a better explanation. But one of the things that you can do with a PubSub is set up a billing PubSub where our billing service will actually go ahead and send one of these billing notifications to a PubSub channel that we can name. So let's go ahead and do that. So yay, getting into some real code here. So first thing I'm going to do is let's go under usage and billing. And actually, can I go ahead and billing account? And under budgets and alerts, this is probably the easiest way to get to it. I'm going to click view budgets. And this will take me into the Google Cloud Platform billing channel. And as I mentioned before, and as you probably know, every Firebase project is also a Google Cloud project underneath the hood. And so basically, I can go ahead and address some of the more advanced features of my Firebase projects right here in Firebase. So here is my money spender. Actually, it's this one here, this one labeled semi-live money spender. I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Here you'll notice I have a few email budget alerts. These are the things that essentially I set up through a little dialogue when I first turned on billing for the project. Maybe you remember doing that, maybe you don't. But the thing that we're interested in is this: connect a PubSub topic to this budget. So I'm going to click this, and I'm going to select a PubSub topic. And in this case, I can just, I'm going to go ahead and type one. I think before, it says I need the PubSub topics create permission. That's a little weird. You would think I would have that since I am the only owner of this project. I wonder why that is. Fascinating. Huh. Well, let's see. Let's make sure I'm in the right project here. I'm in Semi-Live Money Spender. Nope, sorry, wrong project. Oh, okay. Well, that was interesting. Apparently, even though I am in the Firebase project, and you know what, let's give this a better name. I hate the fact that all my project names are just named Firebase project. We'll call this Semi-Live Money Spender. The fact was I actually had to actively switch, not to this one, which was sort of my old Money Spender project, but this one, Semi-Live Money Spender. I had to actually switch to that before I could create a topic. For some reason, I just had no projects created. Unusual, but there you go. All right, so I'm going to say create a topic. And it used to be, I think the last time I did this, I called it billing PubSub. And I realized that name's kind of redundant. Like, you're already creating a PubSub topic, so calling it billing PubSub is sort of unnecessary. So I'm just going to call it billing. And we are not going to use a customer managed encryption key. I don't even really fully understand how that works. And since I tend to not mess with encryption that I don't understand, I'm just going to let Google manage the encryption for me. So I'm going to hit create topic. And there you go. Make sure you hit save. And now within my Semi-Live Money Spender, I'm basically now getting periodic notifications through my project Semi-Live Money Spender topics billing PubSub. All right, so now we need to write our cloud function that's going to go ahead and listen to this topic. And if you ever look at our documentation, let's see, cloud function PubSub trigger. You know what? Actually, here. Cloud function billing PubSub, because I think that'll get us to the page. Yes, this is examples of automated cost control responses. And by the way, this is the documentation I'm essentially using as sort of the framework for most of what I'm doing. It's not like I know this stuff off the top of my head. I'm just mostly, reading the docs. You might notice, by the way, that like the functions here are a little different than what we're going to do in Cloud Firestore, in Cloud Functions. Firebase Cloud Functions simplifies a little bit of the process in terms of sort of deploying functions and also, sort of maybe more simply listening to various PubSub topics. So this is actually looks a little different than the code we're going to do, but the basic principle is the same. So here, let's just go ahead and write the code. And you can see what we're doing here. So exports, let's call our function, receive billing notice. And I've already gone ahead and imported, functions from Firebase Functions. We'll call functions PubSub, and then we're going to pick our topic. And in our case, I believe we called it billing. And then on publish. And this is basically going to be, a function that takes in a message and, does something with it. So let's see, what can we do here? I guess let's go ahead and print it out. So here, const data equals message.json. And this will be essentially the payload of the PubSub notification we're receiving. Let's console log received PubSub notification. And we'll console log the data. So, you know what? Let's deploy this thing and test it. Let's do that. All right. So we'll do a Firebase deploy only functions. I will wait a little bit for this to deploy. And there we go. All right, that took a while. So we have our function deployed. How do we test it? So I suppose one answer is just to kind of wait a while. I find that these billing PubSub notifications tend to arrive like every 20 minutes or so. Although I think the first time you turn on billing PubSub for your project, like it takes a couple hours, I think, for the PubSub to sort of start up. But then after that, you get it like every 20 minutes or so. However, I don't want to wait that long. That would make for a pretty boring video. Luckily, the documentation does tell us how we can go ahead and test it. So testing your cloud function, this basically is kind of the payload or what a typical billing notification payload might look like. And to do that, we can publish a message in PubSub using this object as the message body. So, well, I guess let's figure out how to do that. So let's see here. So it looks like there's a couple of ways of publishing messages. Well, lots of ways. The way I've been doing it has been to use this gcloud command line tool to call gcloud PubSub topics publish. But this is funny. I hadn't noticed this before. Maybe this is new, or maybe I just never noticed it. It looks like you can also do it directly from the Google Cloud Console, which might be a little easier. Let me show you both ways. So I believe I already have the gcloud command line tool installed, gcloud version. Yes, I do. If you don't have this installed, probably the easiest way is, do a search for like gcloud CLI install. And you should get various options for whatever platform you're on. And this will go ahead, and install everything for you, hopefully. And then I think just to make sure that I am properly signed in to this account, I'm going to call gcloud auth login. And that will go ahead and yes, I want to use this account. And yes, I'm going to go ahead and authorize the command line tool. And hooray, that's fantastic. And actually, I guess the next thing I want to do is go ahead and set the right project by calling gcloud config set project. So let's do that. And let me just make sure I get my project ID name properly here. Let's go to cloud. Sorry, hold on, let's go to the Cloud Console. And here we go. There's my project ID, semi-live money spender. All right, so I now have my project properly set up, and now I can call gcloud PubSub topics publish. And here I'm going to type in the name of my PubSub topic, which I believe is billing, and then message. And then here in quotes, I'm going to actually put, and let's see if I can find this, the sample message. So here again is the sample payload. I'm just going to copy and paste this into my command line. End it with my single quote. And I think that should do it. How do we know if it worked? Well, let's go and check out our Cloud Function log. So over here on functions, I'm already here. You know what? I could probably even, let's just look at logs just for my receive billing notice function. And here we go. So here's the function I just sent. And you can see basically all it's really doing is spitting out the key value pairs that I am getting within this notification. So that's nice. It's also telling me apparently function returned undefined, expected promise or value. I think you can just probably fix that by adding in a return here. And I won't bother you with deploying this. But this seemed to work. But let's look at the other way of doing it as well, which is let's go ahead and use the console. So let's see. Let's go to the PubSub topics page on our platform. Let's make sure we have our project, semi-live money spender. And I'll click on topics. And there's my topic ID. Fantastic. And I'm going to go ahead and click publish message, which will publish a single message to this topic. And let me go ahead and I think I already have it copied in my clipboard, but let me copy this again. And I'll paste this. And just to make sure, I'm not looking at the logs from my CLI tool, let's call our budget from console. and we'll hit publish. And once again, hopefully if I go back to my logs, wait a moment or two, and there we go. This is the new PubSub topic that I received within my Cloud function. You can see because the budget display name is now budget from console. So look at that. We have basically successfully created a PubSub topic that is linked to our billing account. And we have created a Cloud function that is set up to receive those topics. Again, you'll notice that I haven't actually shown the full complete cycle where we're getting real topics from my billing channel, because I believe I probably have to wait a couple hours for that to get going, and that would make for a really boring video. But I think for the purposes of development, we're okay and can probably continue to move on. So I realized, the first semi-live video that I do is never very interesting. It's always kind of like, hey, let's do a lot of setup work. But we've accomplished a fair amount, I think, already in these 20 minutes or so. And now we're set up so we can actually start doing something a little more interesting with these billing notifications as we receive them through our PubSub channel. And we'll talk about doing a little more of that in the next video. So I'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.